Why?
Black people lost character. Look at all the neighborhoods, the communities, the cities where blacks have taken over. When they move into those areas, they're very nice. But by the time the blacks are done with them, crime, homelessness, they don't paint their homes, they don't clean up. It just become a mess.
We grew up to this shit. Like, ain't nothing.
It's because of lack of family. And most black people today do not believe in God. They believe about him, but they don't believe in him. It wasn't that way when I was growing up, but it's that way today.
If you walk through any black urban community, you see many black men standing on corners doing nothing.
Get this paper. That's the only thing you can do unless these niggas want smoke. You know?
Okay. Young, middle-aged, and old. Because they're operating under a definition that is different from what God has defined for them as their role as men.
We go to other spots, fuck niggas up, beat niggas up, come through this motherfucker, you gonna die.
You gonna die.
You can't even come to the store and get no motherfucking bottle. You gonna get robbed and killed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's how it is. And niggas do a lot of hate.
Sometimes I'm ashamed of black people because we let people take advantage of us.
And you can't even call me back tomorrow?
What are we projecting to the world? What are we rapping about?
Porn star, big booties, let me film it, then shoot it. 3D money, no illusion.
It's scary to me at times. That is not black culture. That's a facade. Throughout history, black folks were honorable. They had integrity. That's what black people were. But now, our black people are Jay-Z, Cardi B, George Floyd.
Hello, hello, hello. What's happening?
Hi.
Am I coming in clear? Am I coming in clear?
Coming in hot.
All right. What's happening, guys? Appreciate you guys for tuning in tonight. We have a special guest with us, Chad Jackson. He is the writer of the film Uncle Tom. He has there's an Uncle Tom 2. I'm not sure when it was released. What date did Uncle Tom 2 drop?
Late August. So August 26, 2022. So just a couple months ago.
Awesome. So I watched the first Uncle Tom. I was trying to finish it up to the second one up today. It's kind of a different take, and I got a few questions I wanted to kind of talk to you about on that one. But let's just for those of us who don't know who you are, if you could just give us a little brief introduction and tell us what inspired you to make this movie and what was your role in the film.
So you didn't actually finish Uncle Tom 2 yet?
No, I haven't completed Uncle Tom 2 yet.
Okay. My personal favorite part of it is like the last 40 minutes. So I think that's when it gets really interesting for most people. So yeah. I do recommend going back and finishing it because
absolutely,
really what we were tackling was a very lofty subject matter, and it builds up kind of slow, but all the information is important, and where the movie ends is the most important part. So I do
Okay.
recommend you and your audience really, you know, take the time to watch it. But I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
what was your question?
Oh, so what inspired you to make this movie, and what was your role in the film?
Yeah, so what inspired me to make this movie is just kind of where we are today, not only as Americans, but specifically in so-called Black culture. Um, you know, as a Christian, I do believe that we suffer for lack of knowledge, and a lot of the information that we operate from is rooted in falsity or falsehoods, mistruths, mythologies, and just straight up propaganda as it relates to who we are as a so-called people, as it relates to our history. And there's a stark disconnect between where our grandmothers, grandfathers, great grandfathers, great grandmothers were, the kind of
Yeah.
lives that they lived, and where we are now.
Yeah.
What we've allowed to have happen was for Hollywood and the music industry and other such factions to take the lowest common denominator of Black life and make
Yeah.
it Black culture. And a lot of us ascribe to be like that, unfortunately. And so
Yeah.
I think that's encompassed in how we vote. You know, Black
Mm-hmm.
people vote 90+% for Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind the fact that Black people are just as diverse as any other ethnic group when
Yeah.
it comes to our likes and dislikes, when it comes to um, our income, when it comes to how we talk, when it comes to just a wide array of things. So
Mm-hmm.
we're diverse in every other respect except for how we vote. And there's a reason for that. And that reason is we get our kind of pseudo identity once again from so-called Black culture, but nobody stops to ask the question of what is Black culture? What is that? You know, and who historically has got to define or who has had the luxury of defining what that is. And
Yeah.
so, again, this is subject matter that is very lofty. We certainly couldn't fit it into one film. We couldn't fit it all into Uncle Tom 2. And there was just
Mm-hmm.
so much leftover information that we had no other choice but to table a lot of the subjects to part 3. So there is a part 3 forthcoming. Um,
Nice.
but yeah,
Nice.
it's just, you know, the short answer to to your question is I myself was tired of the kind of run of the mill talking points of what is Black culture and what
Yeah.
does that mean, and so we set out to make a movie to kind of explore that idea and those concepts.
So, in your opinion, why do you think people, Black people in particular, are so insistent on believing lies as opposed to the truth or unflattering realities?
Well, there's power in victimhood. If you think about it, anytime a politician uses the term African American, it's always accompanied by some kind of grievance policy that they're trying to push. I don't care if they're a Republican or a Democrat. And so we're looked at as this kind of little brother to the larger American society that always need to be helped. And a lot of people look at us that way. And unfortunately, we look at ourselves that way. And that's kind of been beaten into our heads, I would say, since the 1960s,
Mm,
when you had the popularity or the popularization of the civil rights movement,
mm,
where a lot of these so called civil rights leaders began to tout this kind of rhetoric that that moved us from a trying race to more of a crying race. And
okay.
so a lot of us, again, we are comfortable being victims, and that kind of lives in the subconsciousness of a lot of Black folks. And so to the extent that you have a Black person say, well, you know what, I'm not a victim, I'm a victor, I am somebody who is going to seize my rights and my humanity as an American citizen and go for whatever I so desire. To the extent that
Mhm.
that person makes that decision, that person is called an Uncle Tom, especially if they start voting in such a way that supports those interests. When I vote, I'm sorry to say, I don't, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry to say that I don't have the collective of Black people in mind when I cast my vote.
Yeah.
When I vote, I have my small business in mind. I have my young children in mind. I have my property taxes in mind. These are the kinds of things I have in mind, and I encourage everybody to have similar things in mind. When you vote in terms of a collective, nothing ever gets done. or you find that you'll often be upset by what the politicians do. Because here's the thing: if you watch a commercial where they're trying to sell you medication, they're telling you about all of the things that this medication will do, all the wonderful things that this medication will do. And at the end of that commercial, they're telling you about all of the side effects, and they kind of speed through that.
Yeah. Yep.
They don't do that with politics. They don't do that when they pander to you. They tell you about all the wonderful things that these policies will bring, but they don't tell you about the side effects, the kind of casualties and the implications that these policies will bring. And so, unfortunately, a lot of, Black folks and other intersectional groups, we go for it. And then we wonder, well, why are we still living, not all of us, because a lot of us are doing quite fine. A lot of us are doing quite well. But to the extent that you have those who aren't doing so well, we don't think to ask, well, are we voting for our own demise? We don't stop to ask that question. We keep doubling down and voting for the same people, expecting a different outcome.
Right. So do you think the civil rights movement was a high point for America?
No, I think it was a low point for America. When you look at the vast scope of how Black America was trending prior to the 1960s, it was certainly on an upward trajectory, in spite of what we know as Jim Crow. A lot of people don't even know what Jim Crow is. They just know it's a word that we should, stiffen up when we hear. The fact of the matter is, a lot of these Jim Crow laws were falling off the books well before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I'm always very wary of the sudden uprising of a so-called social justice movement. I don't care what it is, whether it's LGBT, whether it's something relating to race or what have you, because typically, or women's suffrage, feminism, whatever the case may be, anytime you have the sudden uprising of a social justice movement, you better believe that there are some powerful elitist type people who are funding and supporting those social justice movements. And they don't give a damn about the people they are professing to be advocating for. Really, what they're seriously interested in is expanding the role of the federal government. Because to the extent that they can expand the role of the federal government, they can begin to slowly chip away at your rights as an American citizen. The fact of the matter is, white people and Black people, especially in the South, were getting along well before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's something that historians don't talk about. If you listen to the Manning-Johnson record, you can see evidence of it in that. If you read anything by Booker T. Washington, whether it be My Larger Education or Up from Slavery, you see evidence of it in that. If you look at archival newspapers from around that era, Black newspapers, you see evidence of it in that. If you look at the archival footage that we found, because we did a very extensive research for our film, you can see in these predominantly Black districts, white people shopping at Black stores and vice versa.
Right.
So what do you do with this information? Because what we know about our history, if you listen to the NAACP, if you listen to the New York Times, which has been around since the early 1900s, if you listen to a lot of these progressive so-called media outlets, is that it was doom and gloom for Black folks, that we were always under the thumb and under the boot of the white man. But when you look at the history and you see Black people buying up buildings in New York in 1905, and you see, we hear about Tulsa, Black Wall Street, but when you learn that there were numerous Black Wall Street scattered throughout the South, it makes you say, maybe I don't come from a lineage of piss poor Black people who couldn't seem to have, come out from under the boot of the white man. And so it makes you, the thing is, to the extent that you have historians promoting, placing on a pedestal, romanticizing the civil rights movement, that's accompanied with a kind of revisionist history of the past. Those two work in tandem with each other, because to the extent that you believe this, it necessitates that, if that makes sense. And so when you begin to deconstruct, or at least look at critically or objectively history, it makes you wonder, well, how necessary was this so-called civil rights movement if these laws were already falling off the books prior to the 1960s. And then you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and you say, I see what they did here. Segregation, government mandated segregation is non-constitutional. Those laws should have been challenged. But the flip side of that, government forced integration is just as constitutional. Malcolm X made this point. Governor Maddox of Georgia at the time made this point. There were many people who made this point from various sides of the political spectrum that government forced integration is 100% unconstitutional. And then you begin to see, well, what they were doing where they were trying to expand the government's role in private owned companies. That means dictating who you can hire, who you can't hire, who you can serve, who you can't serve on whatever basis. And again, this is very unconstitutional because as a business owner who believes strongly in my Christian faith, I should be able to reject or throw away the application of a staunch atheist who wants to come and work for me. I should be able to do that.
Yep, it's your choice. Yep.
I should be able to reject service of somebody who, because I own a construction company, I should be able to reject the service of somebody who wants to hire me to build a strip club. I should just be able to do that. I should have a right as a free and private citizen to discriminate. The problem is government mandated segregation. That's the problem. And so when you're able to sensationalize the issue and you make it about racism, and you're not really looking at the kind of nuances and complexities of the question, you're able to easily get the crowd to do whatever it is you want to do under the guise of emotionalism and sensationalism. And so to answer your question, no, I don't think that the civil rights movement was a high point for America. I think it was a high example of deception and using emotionalism and sensationalism to do it.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Corey. You good?
You said something really interesting in the beginning. You said that most Black people don't know what Black culture is. I'm one of those people. So if you can define what Black culture is, that'd be a good thing for me so that I can be educated.
No, I think it's I think that's I don't think that there is a specific answer to that question. Because even after slavery, you had different pockets of Black folks who reacted to their being free in different ways. You had some Black folks who wanted to stay on the plantation because they were too scared to kind of get out into the big bad world. You had others who were, who were saying it's about time and they couldn't wait to buy land and to pursue sovereignty and autonomy. So you had different kind of variations of Black folks. What Booker T. Washington did after he, left Hampton and moved to Tuskegee, Alabama, and became the headmaster of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, he was taking in these students who were the children of former slaves. And what was happening at that time is that you have Black folks who were sending their children off to college because they didn't want for their children to have to work in the fields like they did. And they thought that by sending them to school, their children will become intellectuals and get a white collar job and be fancy. But Booker T. Washington, if you read up from slavery, he said, well, no. He's like, I'm all about education and book learning, but you're also going to work. You're also going to learn that there's dignity in work and that you should be proud of the work that you do and what you are able to build with your hands. And so Booker T. Washington and men like him, those who are part of the Negro Business League, were able to kind of set in motion this kind of independent, cast down your bucket where you are kind of Black culture. Whereas up in the North, under the behest of W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP, they believed in something called the talented 10th, and that intellectualism and protesting is a way that you make yourself seen and heard and known in this world. And then you had, of course, Blacks who migrated to the Midwest and to California and places of that nature. And so again, you have a wide, vast variety of so-called Black culture, much the same as you do with literally any other ethnic group. And so I don't know that there's a singular answer to that question. But what I found was that as you moved into the 1960s and you had the popularization of Martin Luther King, and again, he was popularized by the white progressive types who were running the media at the time, the newspapers and magazines, things of that nature. They were able to single-handedly popularize him. What he was doing was he was going to the churches, because he understood that to the extent that you can shift Black thought, particularly how it engages in civil rights, to the extent that you needed to shift it, you need the endorsement and the co-signing of the church. And so he would tour the country, going to all these churches, whether it be poor rural Black churches or affluent Black churches that persisted of the higher echelon of Blacks, because there was a disconnect between them. And you can look at sermons that he preached at these churches, and mind you, he never actually preached the gospel. If you look at both the writ as well as the video footage of every Martin Luther King speech or sermon, he never actually preached the gospel, for those of your audience who are Christian. I think that's important to know. But what he did do was he sought to galvanize the different nooks and crannies and aspects of Black folks across the country, galvanize them into a singular collective. And he did that successfully, because he was in cahoots with the LBJ administration. They were working in tandem with each other. They were cutting deals with each other in the back room. Martin Luther King would collectivize the Black folks, and LBJ would push certain policies. And the whole objective, the whole idea, is to guarantee the Black vote for millennia. And we've been voting Democrat since the 1960s. So they were successful in their efforts. But I think, to answer your question the best way I can, I would say Black culture is an artificial, fabricated word, and the substance of it is poured into by the entertainment industry, by Hollywood, and by mainstream media. Again, there's a stark disconnect between us and our forebearers, our grandfathers and great grandfathers. They were moving one direction. There was a shift in the 1960s, and then now we're going in this other direction, and it hasn't been positive. And my question is, are we now at a place in history where we can look at the past 60 years and analyze those past 60 years on its merits to determine whether or not we went in the right direction?
I think a group that you might be forgetting is the angry Negro.
Yeah.
From the former plantations. And I think those are the ones that defected mostly to Du Bois, because he was pushing more of a Marxist socialist idea. And you see them a lot being put into positions of power, namely next to Martin Luther King Jr. They brought people like Sharpton and Jesse, who had a known history of angry kind of responses to the way things were going. And they coupled it so that they had a viewpoint that they can bring both the docile Negro and the angry Negro to identify with one movement, like you said, to kind of make it a stronger force. That kind of thing is an easy way to make the culture itself based around the anger of the so-called atrocities of slavery. Meanwhile, you had a whole dichotomy of Black people that were like, we're not like that. It's done. We're glad. We're moving forward. And those people were kind of pushed to the side and said, if you don't come along with us, you must have liked slavery, or you're just not happy to be free. And we see that kind of perpetuated today in the media, like you're saying, and that's one of the best breakdowns I've heard.
Wow. Okay, so I kind of want to piggyback off of what you said earlier. You said Martin Luther King didn't write his own speeches, and if you could just kind of expound on that a little bit more and tell us why that's such an important point to know.
Yeah, that's an important point to know, because the whole point in saying that is to help you realize that Martin Luther King was made for TV. Here's a man who grew up in the church. His father was a pastor, and so he had a front row seat to watching his dad deliver speeches every Sunday, and he was a phenomenal orator. His father was, and Martin Luther King himself, Jr., was a very bright young man. But he was very intelligent to a fault. He kind of brags in his papers that he was smarter than all of his classmates growing up, and then smarter than some of his teachers, so he thought. By age 12, he says that he rejected the deity of Christ. He rejected the resurrection of Christ.
Wow.
He graduated high school by age 15 and went off to college, had no interest in being a pastor. He said that he didn't accept the gospel, but if he were going to accept the gospel, then he would accept the liberal interpretation of the social gospel. And so that's what he believed in. He was encouraged by some of his professors to become a pastor. A lot of people believe that Martin Luther King wanted to go to a conservative theological seminary, but he was rejected because of the color of his skin. That's absolutely 100% false. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. Again, he said himself that by the time he went to college, he had already accepted the liberal interpretation of the gospel. So he ended up going to Crozer University or seminary. If you look at the correspondence of letters between his professors as he was transitioning from one college to another, they were saying amongst themselves, these white liberal professors, that this is precisely the kind of Negro minister who can take our ideology to the stubborn Negro South. It's all written right there.
Right.
And so that's exactly what happened. Now, whenever he graduated from seminary, he moved to Alabama. He took a job there as a pastor. Immediately, he was selected to be the face of the Montgomery bus boycott. He befriended men like Bayard Rustin. He was a very prominent organizer with the Communist Party. As a young man in the Communist Party, he learned about nonviolent agitation. In fact, he traveled to India and worked alongside Gandhi. And when he came back to the United States, he was able to take this ideology and teach it to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King also befriended Stanley Levison, who was a treasurer for a communist front group in New York, as well as other communist attorneys and other folks. Now, these are the individuals who wrote most of Martin Luther King's speeches. Now, it's important to understand that is because when it comes to like communist tactics, they're very much utilitarian. A utilitarian is an individual who's willing to use any tool or any device necessary to accomplish their goal. Even if they don't believe in the tool, they see this as a kind of necessary thing to kind of get from point A to point B. Walter Lippmann wrote in his book, in his 1922 book called Public Opinion, he said that if a leader wants to move the crowd in a certain direction, the very first thing he must do is to use rhetoric, use symbols in his rhetoric that resonates with the crowd, symbols of patriotism, symbols of religion, symbols that pinch a grievance, so on and so forth. As soon as you earn the trust of your audience, they will follow you anywhere. And so that you can then begin to push a campaign, even if that campaign is disconnected from the rhetoric you preached to begin with. Again, this is Walter Lippmann, Public Opinion, 1922. So what Martin Luther King's insiders and advisors are doing is they're applying what Walter Lippmann talked about 40 or 60 years prior. When it comes to I Have a Dream speech, this is something that even conservatives quote to this very day. They don't see it as a Trojan horse, because what did Martin Luther King start talking about after the fact? Mass redistribution of wealth, basic annual income, all these different things that are very Marxist in origin.
Yeah.
And so the reason it's important to talk about, to your question, Neil, why was it important for to know that Martin Luther King didn't write most of his speeches? It's important to know that because you begin to understand how he was used to accomplish a certain goal.
So that's even for me, it's heavy. That's a lot. I just think because Martin Luther King, he's essentially enshrined as a deity. And do you think that, okay, do you think the media also conspired to sort of prop him up, or were they hostile to him during that time?
And don't forget about the schools.
And the mainstream media were certainly, tripping over themselves to prop him up. Of course, you had defectors. The thing is, like, you didn't have a kind of collectivization of the media back then like you do today. It seems like, and you guys have seen these montages of all of these media, companies, these journalists saying the same exact script word for word that came out maybe a couple years ago. But in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, you didn't have this kind of collectivization, but you did have a lot of very kind of socialist-minded people in journalism. In fact, Walter Lippmann, who I quoted earlier, they call him the father of modern journalism. And so that kind of gives you an idea of who the brain trust is for the journalists as they moved into the middle part of the 20th century, so on into today. And so when you think about the fact that you had these journalists who were progressives, who were liberals by their own admission, and were themselves antithetical to Christianity, these are the same kind of people who would attack Billy Graham, who would talk about whenever Billy Graham would give a speech at the White House or something, that there should be a separation of church and state. Those were the same exact people who were promoting Martin Luther King. So you ask the question, why is it that you are rejecting this Christian pastor, but you're promoting this Christian pastor? What's the difference? Do they preach the same Christianity? The reality is no, they weren't. Billy Graham was talking about repentance and turning to God, regardless of what your circumstances are. So too was Dr. J.H. Jackson, who was a Black pastor. He was the head of the National Baptist Convention, which was the largest Black church convention in the world. And so they were talking about repenting, trusting God, being a man, being a productive. Martin Luther King wasn't talking about any of those things. He was challenging the system. Everything's the system's fault. And what that did is that caused a kind of shift in the mindset of Black men, unfortunately, because when you look at Booker T. Washington, who died in 1915, and you look at a lot of the Black pastors that came after Booker T. Washington, they were kind of echoing a lot of the things that Washington was talking about with regard to Black economics, with regard to entrepreneurship, with regard to productivity and families, and so on and so forth. But there's a speech, not necessarily a speech, but an interview that Martin Luther King gave in the 1960s, where he was asked specifically about manhood. And what did he say? He said, "We can't be men. Our circumstances disallow us from being men." And of course, he was exaggerating, but that's what the kind of rhetoric he would use. Now, that kind of rhetoric is in keeping with Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, where he says that the radical community organizer must use language, must use rhetoric that disenfranchises or makes people discontent and dissatisfied with their conditions.
Because the first step, the first step in the community organizing is community disorganization. Sorry about that.
No, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you for clarifying that. And so to the extent that you can make people feel discontent and disenchanted, they will become angry naturally. And then you can come along with a kind of campaign or something to say, look, if we go this way, this will make you happier. That's exactly what he was able to do. And so, what the journalists understood is that they saw something in Martin Luther King, not so much his being a Christian, but kind of the undertone of a lot of the things that he was saying. And they saw it as, not all of them, but many of them saw it as a kind of subversive thing that was going on. And they were smart enough to see that. And it's for that reason that they were all too willing to give him his due and to give him plenty of screen time and put him on the front pages of magazines and newspapers and all the rest of it.
So. I think he was the modern, for that time, Sam, Master Sam, from the book Uncle Tom. He was the voice that the slave master used to get a hold of the slaves and make them understand, because they were all trying to avoid Uncle Tom, even though they knew him, but they understood that Sam had the ear of Massa, and Sam was the one that was dictating things were going on. The second thing I think that happened here with that, if you look at how the media had camera angles on Martin Luther King, and I bet I'll dare anyone to go back and look how the camera angle was on Hitler and the late footage of Stalin. It's the same
Optics.
camera angle they use where he was like, and it's at this corner here. The same thing with Hitler, the exact same off camera, above you, you're below, listening to somebody larger than you. Almost the exact same camera angle, same direction, and they did it at all the same hand motions. Both him and Hitler had the same hand motions when they spoke. On occasion, he'd do the Stalin hand too. Those are things I recognized when I watched him. It wasn't something you can freely talk about necessarily, because people were like, of course, they'd berate you for talking like that. While his speeches were, he is what the modern day preacher is, a motivational speaker. And if I can get you to think in terms of motivation to get you to get into your fields, I've won. I don't have to mention God necessarily. I have to mention a lot of things about God, but put them on a human context, and you'll follow. The exact same rhetoric is being pushed in the secular media today, but in the context of not God. But they created now this idea that you can be God. So why would I need to mention God at all? The slow boil has happened already. Take it from God to, well, it's kind of like God, but in aspects you kind of are God. So why do you need God? And now we are, hey, we can do whatever we want, and this is the problem that we see today.
Yeah, but remember, he turned into a god for the black people.
For the black, he was now he is,
and that was done intentional. And this is the reason why, right now today, you would find that people are going to be highly upset that we don't worship him like they do.
Right.
When you really look at King and just look back, what did he do except made you feel good? And we talk about that all the time, that he just was a guy that would just feel on you, and that's a pervert to feel on somebody. You know what I'm saying? So that's what he did. I mean, and those who don't feel nasty or violated, something's wrong with them. And so what they do, since they want to, they learn how to flip it around, they call us the coons and the sellouts, because they allowed themselves to be felt on and molested. And that's exactly what it was. And it's pathetic. You know what I'm saying? For real, he felt on us.
Yeah, I was going to ask it. I mean, pretty much answer the question, but so the Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, the Obama, they're pretty much a byproduct of the same sort of rhetoric Martin Luther King espoused.
They're a continuation of him. And that's the thing, is like somebody, because I posted a video on my Instagram where I compared Raphael Warnock to Martin Luther King. And somebody had like a sidebar conversation with me saying like, no, there's no similarity. Warnock is nothing like Martin Luther King. And I asked, well, what's the difference between the two? What's the difference? And this person wasn't able to give me a straight answer. So I put the same audience to you guys and to the audience. What's the difference between Raphael Warnock and Martin Luther King? If you can tell me, I'll sit down and shut up. But there is no difference between the two. Raphael Warnock is a continuation of Martin Luther King in terms of using the church to push political agenda. Has nothing to do with the salvation of the individual. Has nothing to do with the onus being on you, regardless of what your circumstances are, because life is hard for everybody. We all suffer. Suffering isn't unique to Black people.
That's right.
Suffering isn't unique to me. And I don't. The whole narrative is that because suffering is specifically reserved for you, we now need the system to do something about your situation, about your plight in life.
Right. They did a good job on us. Because they made us feel like, feeling on us again, feel like that suffering is a good thing, and we're proud of it. And that's displayed all through rap music.
Pedestalizing it. Yeah.
They talk about this suffering and what we've been through and all this different stuff. And then 95% of it is lies anyway. But we receive those lies because it feel good. It's the same way as a female or the opposite is whispering sweet nothings in your ear. And that's what these rappers and this hip hop music is doing. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And again, we've been felt on, and you should feel molested by it. So shame on the black folk and the white folk who promote and endorse this garbage, because it's leading us down the wrong path. And unfortunately, we have a lot of so-called conservatives. We have a lot of Christian rappers that are constantly supporting and promoting it, and people need to recognize that and understand what it is. And until we do, we won't be able to move on, because we study worshiping the same old thing. And it looked like something different, but it's the same old thing.
The
100%.
other thing too, the one bad thing, and this might be hurtful to some, but a weak mind seeks validation. It does not seek reproving. It seeks validation for its plight.
You better quit talking about people. You better stop.
If you are a weak-minded person, you do not want people coming up to tell you that you're wrong in something, that you need to change something. You want people to solidify for you that what you're feeling is outside of your control, and you can't change anything about it, and you can point a finger at something, and if you keep doing that, that person that you're seeing as a problem might change things for you. But we want to keep that mindset, because what it is, it comes back to what won. I've always told people that your emotional state, and you've heard this before, don't make a big decision emotionally, because what you'll end up making is the wrong decision. Almost 100% of the time, you'll make the wrong decision. But it is one of the stronger emotions that the human nature possesses. If it's not kept in check by logic in the brain and by facts in the real world, you will fall for your emotional state. And that's what they did a good job of keeping suppressed: facts and the real world situation. Now you have an entire generation. Well, this actually happened about 4 generations ago, but you have it, and now you have a solidified generation of young men and women who believe wholeheartedly that the situation they are in is inescapable. Whether it's true or not, it's inescapable, and they did nothing to get themselves there. And the more people on the news and in politics that tell them, yeah, that's right, and you know what, we are going to help you out, they are convinced, and they'll vote for that person. And they're not even thinking long term or looking back into history just short while ago that they didn't do anything with a generation prior to, saying the exact same thing, because their emotions are the only thing that's winning right now.
Have you thought about this? Any of y'all thought about this? And it just hit me just now, Merlin. What you were saying just for some reason took me to this. When you go back to the 70s, and I'm sure in the 60s, I don't think I was around back then. But when you go back so far and you think about how us blacks in the black community, we really admired God. And if you didn't, you were ashamed to say it.
Yeah.
We went to church, we praised the Lord, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Whether it was right or wrong, it was our intention to follow God. Nowadays, and so look where we at right now. So that was the intention, and look where we at now. Now we at a place where people don't even care nothing about God. You don't think it's like you got so many people more than ever saying God don't even exist.
We care about zodiac signs, though.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
right. So watch this, and then we got all these rappers that's spitting all this stuff, and then you got people turning around and calling it excellence. Watch this now. Now imagine what that leaves for our grandbabies. That's a tough thing to think about. It wasn't even that long ago where God was the man. You know what I'm saying? And now they saying, I don't believe this guy. What are y'all crazy? Y'all believe in some kind of hero or something, some character. And so now think about this 20 years from now, where does that leave us? That's a thought that would, yeah, man, it's bad. I mean,
so I had to write down this quote because this just stuck out like a sore thumb when I was watching Uncle Tom 2. But this is what it said. Communism is a stolen version of Christianity that tries to erase God, but still satisfy that desire in the human heart to see all things made right. Yeah, I know. It just hit me, man. I gotta write that.
It's God without God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if that's okay, if that's true, so why are blacks so susceptible to communism now more than ever?
Brainwashed.
Right.
Yeah.
The simple answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brainwashed.
Next question.
What do you say? What do you say?
Next question.
So the next question.
Okay.
No. He's right though. He's right though. And the thing is like it's what we talked about earlier. You had a subversion that took place in the church. This kind of co-opting thing that took place in the church. And I think Yuri Bezmenov talked about it best when he talked about demoralization. He says it takes 2 to 3 generations to demoralize a group of people or a country. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Martin Luther King was doing his thing in the church. Somebody mentioned, I think it was Marlon, or somebody in the comments, I can't quite remember, Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend, Jesse Jackson, Reverend Raphael Warnock. What they figured out, because when you look at the NAACP faction, NAACP started in 1907. These were men who believed in their own intelligence. They believed that their you know what doesn't stink. And they were atheists. They were nihilists, many of them. W.E.B. Du Bois himself was a communist. You would never see them calling themselves reverend. But Martin Luther King was able to figure something out. You see, he was able to do the same thing that these guys were doing, but from within the church. And so that's where you get your reverend this and that, your reverend this and your reverend that. And so they were able to, in a sense, co-opt. Because the thing is, like, to the extent, I mean, look at Stacey Abrams right now. She's going on tour. She's going to all the churches. And if you listen to her speeches, she sounds like she's preaching, right? And they're using this kind of political language with a kind of spiritual tinge to it. And a lot of us, you know, the Bible talks about like we suffer for lack of knowledge. So a lot of us, because we don't know and how to distinguish evil from good, we are mistakenly tricked and bamboozled by bad or evil appearing as good. The Bible says to test every spirit to see if it's of God. We're not testing these spirits. We're just going along with it because it sounds good. This is a tried and true tactic of Satan. We see him using it whenever he tried to tempt Jesus in the wilderness. What did he do? Whenever Jesus would reject or deny whatever it was that Satan was trying to get him to do, Satan would use scripture to try to tempt Jesus to do whatever it is he was trying to do, whether it be to bow down and worship him or whatever the case may be. So Satan will always use the light or a kind of rendition of the light to make himself look friendly and amiable to you so that you might go along with what it is that he's trying to do. And so unfortunately, that's why a lot of people are tricked, is because they think that this is good because of its optic, because of its aesthetic, but they have no idea that there's, you know, their detriment kind of lurking in the distance. So
one thing I want people to remember before we get to what you're requesting, Neil, and again, this is all part of going back and watch. And I think he just kind of made this clear to me. Ritualistic voodoo and black magic resembles a lot of the pulpit preaching you hear today. Like I'm dead serious. If you go back and it's a kind of a swooping, swooning, repeated woo, woo, woo to engage something dark inside you.
Remember, Africa.
It's all the same thing. They have to drive this it's part of your emotion, but mostly it's a spiritual kind of attack to keep you hummed. Okay, so they hone in and they get that same and if you look at all of them, I guarantee you, the TD Jakes of the world, the dollars of the world, all of them, every last one of them, they use a swooning over and over, repetitious, loud screaming comeback, loud screaming to get you. And so it's been
they all sound the same.
All sound the same, and now they push it into politics.
They do. Yep.
Stand on your feet.
Praise the Lord. Yeah.
You know,
because if you watch how the voodoos did it, how them witch doctors do it, they do the hoodah, hoodah. It's the exact same thing. Okay,
Ooh,
it's
that
not
is
regular
crazy.
You better stop.
spirituality. This is black magic that they're trying to put over it. So
You better stop.
if you think this is not just brainwashing too, it's spiritual washing too. It's whitewashing his spirit or
All right.
blackwashing it, I guess, if you want to consider
Hey,
it that.
Merlin, Merlin.
Mm.
I love you, brother.
Okay.
I don't want to wake up tomorrow and call you and you ain't answering the phone.
You serious?
Hey, so Marlon, I'm sorry, Neil, you want to take some calls, right?
Yes, guys. If you want to call in, here's the number. We got the number here up. Just call in if you guys had any questions, want to chime in, make a point. Just give us a call. Give us a call. This is all very enlightening. I'm still I just think that I just think a lot of this is going to be difficult for the American, well, just for the average American psyche to digest. And I think it's in part because maybe it's like a paradigm shift if you start to kind of open up and see beyond what you've been told and fed for this entire time. I don't know. Just
you got one coming in, Neil.
Okay.
Hello. What's your name and where you calling from? Hello. What's your name? Where you calling from? Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but you got to turn us off in the background, brother.
Sorry about that. I'm turned down.
All right.
Down a little bit. I was just saying it's Myron Jones out of Houston, Texas.
Yeah, but you got to turn it off. You got to turn it off. I ain't trying to be funny, but you got because it's gonna be ringing in the ear.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Is that better?
Absolutely.
Hey, Myron.
I just chimed in. Hey there, Neil. How's it going?
It's going, man. Appreciate you coming.
I just wanted to chime in a little bit, and I just got off Mother Zoom conference, and I'm appreciating what I've heard the few minutes I've been on, and when y'all talked about the communism and these so-called black preachers, I had to laugh because when the gentleman was just talking about the voodoo and the black magic and the witchcraft and all that, I've been told over the years, I need to repent for talking about that stuff, especially when it comes to black people. And, it's ironic when y'all mentioned the communism aspect. About 2-3 weeks ago, I actually released a video titled Why Blacks Embrace Socialism, and gave a lot of historical aspects in there too. So, I just wanted to chime in. I didn't have any questions or anything. I just kind of wanted to let Neil know I was able to get in for a few minutes.
I appreciate that, man. I really do. Appreciate that. Wow.
Alrighty.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Wow, there you have it.
Let's get one more in.
Let's get one more, and then I got just one closing question for Chad here. So good.
Here you go. One. Hello, what's your name and where you calling from?
Yes. Hi, Corey. How are you?
All right. Everybody's doing fine. Everybody. How about yourself?
Hey.
I am doing well. Actually, 4 men.
Uh-oh.
And I am really learning a lot from you guys. Okay, my name is Anna, and I'm calling from Texas.
Are you trying to? Are you watching us on the screen, or are you talking through the phone? Because I think it's a delay. So don't.
Well, actually, I'm talking to the phone. Well, I'm watching you all on screen, but the volume is all the way out.
Okay, so turn that off and then talk through the phone, so that way, you don't have the time delay.
All right, no, it's off.
Okay, thank you. So did you have a question?
Yes. So Martin Luther King. So is he a reverend or not?
Well, yes, he did get a doctoral degree from seminary, so he was ordained as a reverend. But it's important to also note that to the extent that he even got his doctoral, that was plagiarized. In other words, he copied a lot of the work from other sources, and it wasn't his own. It wasn't his own thought. It wasn't his own, thinking. And a lot of people kind of miss this part too. But he was encouraged to plagiarize by his professors, once again, who was trying to position him to be what he turned out to be. So again, here is a man who was made for TV. He didn't believe in the Christian gospel. He was a skilled orator, once again, because he watched his father growing up. He was able to, in a sense, mimic a lot of the kind of patterns and things that his father would do. So he was a natural at it. He believed in Marxism. He said as much in some of his personal papers. The people who knew him best and were close to him said the same thing, including Harry Belafonte, who was a close friend of his, and James Cone, the so-called father of Black liberation theology. And so Marxism was definitely something that he believed in. And even if he didn't say it explicitly, when you look at the things that he was talking about, the kind of policies that he were pushing, these were Marxist-esque policies. And so, yes, he was a reverend to the extent that he got the ordination and he got the degrees to become a reverend, but he wasn't what the Bible prescribes as the makings of a teacher of the gospel. If that's the question.
Another word, a man of God.
Correct. Yeah, because the Bible lays out very. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, so another word. So he was just used.
Yes, voluntarily though.
Was he used, or was he volunteered himself for whatever purpose that he wanted to achieve?
Both.
Because most of his speech, when you really listen to it, he's actually gearing toward Black people more than anything else.
I'm sorry, I missed that. He's doing what toward Black people?
Yeah, it's hard.
No, I said because most of his preaching was geared toward Black people more than anything else. So I'm asking you, is that correct? Because you were the man who did all this research concerning him and bringing everything to the light.
Well, he spoke at many different locations and before many different audiences, and much like a politician, he would switch up his rhetoric depending on the audience that he was in front of, whether he was at a college or university, whether he was, speaking at a political convention or at a Black church, or even a white church as well, a white Lutheran or Methodist church or what have you. And so he was, to your first question, yes, he was used, but he was voluntarily used. It wasn't as if somebody tricked him and, all of a sudden, he's pushing Marxism and doesn't know how he got here. No, he believed in the ideology, and he was deceptive in the way that he went about ushering in that ideology. And that's an important thing, is like, whenever I bring up this, subject of Martin Luther King, people say, oh, well, he wasn't a good man, but who among us is good? We all sin. We all do these things. And I say, yes, but Martin Luther King was deceptively pushing Marxism. Now, you had people like Stokely Carmichael, and you had people like the more kind of militant, radical individuals, H. Rap Brown, Huey P. Newton, and others. You had these individuals who would tell you to your face that they were Marxists. Martin Luther King was doing something a bit different. He was using the guise, the mask of a Christian pastor to preach Marxist ideology. And that, to me, I think deserves a little bit more scrutiny. The Bible itself says that people who profess to preach the gospel will be judged more harshly than the rest of us. The Bible says that. And so it's not like I'm trying to attack him.
In other words, in short, he was a con artist.
Okay. Well, actually, my thought is this, because if I'm listening to that man talking, Chad Jackson talking,
he's actually what?
What I'm hearing is he's well, actually, to me, he's more like a Black Hitler.
Ooh.
Did anybody ever thought about that? Because
well, I kind of half mentioned that, but yeah.
He was a Black Hitler, and nobody knew about it because everything was just all caught up into the Black movement.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying this, I am born and partly raised African, and then I came to the United States. And guess where I landed at? I landed in New York City.
Wow.
Anyway, yes, wow. Anyway, so just this one question, and I'm going to be out before Corey tell me, well, we got to go.
I was just going to say that. I was just
so this question kept popping up in my spirit. So what is the purpose of assassinating him?
They were done.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like if you read communist tactics out of the Soviet Union dating as far back as the 1920s, one of the things that they push is martyrdom.
Yeah, martyrs.
Yeah, because to the extent that you can create a martyr, you can leverage that martyr to get people into the streets, to riot, and to force the government's hand to push policies. Because like it's kind of a win-win situation. Either people will take to the streets, you'll have a lot of chaos and calamity, or you will have the government say, okay, I'm going to now push all these policies for which he fought. Both of those are a win for the Marxists. Martin Luther King was very hot on this kind of anti-war movement in the latter years of his life, as well as pushing, labor, galvanizing the labor movement, which, as we know, Karl Marx ends the Communist Manifesto with "Workers of the world unite." The labor movement has always been part and parcel of the communist agenda. A lot of people believe that the FBI had something to do with Martin Luther King's assassination. I don't profess to know one way or the other. But when you look at the dots and you connect the dots of how important martyrdom is to the communist agenda, it makes you kind of say, there might be something here.
You don't want to know either, because if you know, you next.
You best keep quiet. Right.
And then, and also the other thing that they did, they make him a martyr and make him famous.
Yep, it's martyrdom.
Yeah.
Okay, now here come that one word you teased me about.
Gotta go.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
You were amazing.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking my call. And I wanted to say hi, Marlon.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
I thank you so much, and I just wanted to leave you, man, with this one word: the spiritual dictates the natural. And right now, everything in the darkness is kind of like just peeking its head out because it cannot be hidden anymore.
Amen. And before you go, amen. And before you go, let me tell you something. You did break a record, so you on the record for talking for 11 minutes. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations.
You have.
Well, God bless you all. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, you and Marlon and these two other additional men. God bless you all and continue in everything that you're doing. And I'm going to continue to pray for you all for more discernment. Amen?
Amen. We love you. All right.
Take care.
All right, then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Wow. I think we covered a lot of ground tonight. I just had really one closing question. I think it pretty much sums up everything we discussed. The question I have is, so why is it so important for us to keep our republic?
Well, that's a great question. The reason, of course, I'm getting a phone call. The reason it's important to keep our republic is because when you think about what the founding fathers were contending with, the kind of tyranny that they were living under, the fact that they left Europe for a reason, and they were being suppressed and oppressed here, much like they were being oppressed in Europe. These are men who were classically educated. These were men who understood kind of the governments of the world, what worked, what didn't work, and more importantly, they understood human nature. Communism, they understand human nature. They pretend that they don't when they push these policies, that the policies that they push. But it's not so much that they don't understand human nature. It's more that they want to reshape and rewire how human beings operate and how we move and how we react and so on and so forth. These are people who are well invested not only in the social sciences but the cognitive sciences as well. Everything is a phobia. Everything is a illness or some. We have a prescription and a diagnosis for literally everything. So they want to, in a sense, basically shape and rewire the minds of man. What our republic gave us is it set man on a trajectory to really be intuitive, to really be creative, to be inventors, so on and so forth, because they realized, especially after the failure of Jamestown, that nobody's going to do it for us. It's on us to really make our own way, to chart our own path. And we need autonomy, we need sovereignty to do that. When you think about people like Thomas Jefferson, who believed in the township, who believed in the farmer governing himself, these were, again, brilliant minds. And I think that what they did with the Constitution and setting forth our republic was simply brilliant. These are people who believed in ending slavery. Of course, there were a lot of economic implications there, and sadly, they weren't able to kind of fast track the ending of slavery. But they did set us on a track to do so, contrary to the 1619 Project and other kind of pseudo intellectuals that are out there. But our republic, once again, set forth the greatest country that the world has ever known. It's the very reason why people come across our seas to get here, because they understand the opportunity that they have here. They can come here, start from nothing, and then 2 or 3 generations in, their descendants are going to Ivy League schools.
Rich.
That's what America is. That's what our republic is. What our so-called expert class has been able to do, unfortunately, is to implant this word in our minds, democracy. Many of us think we live in a democracy. You hear it all over the place. You hear it in journalism. You hear it in the media. Everybody seems to think we live in a democracy. They're teaching that to our kids right now in the public schools, that we live in a democracy. When you realize that the same people who are saying we live in a democracy are the very ones who are pushing and shaping public opinion, you begin to understand that on the one hand, they're telling you what to think and how to think. And on the other hand, they're telling you that you have free choice. You have freedom of choice. You have freedom of self-determination. And so, they're definitely herding the cattle in the direction they wish them to go. Republic favors the sovereignty, the critical thinker, the individuality of the person, whereas a so-called democracy is the playground for demagogues who wish to use that for their own advantage. And so preserving your republic is tough work. That means that you have to be engaged and involved in local politics. You have to know what's going on at your school board meetings and what kind of bonds they're trying to pass, which has an effect on your property taxes. That means that you have to understand what's going on in your city council. That means that you have to understand what's going on at the state level. That means you have to understand what they're teaching in your schools. That means you have to be cautious of propaganda that's being pushed. That means you have to protect your family, especially as a man, to make sure that they're not being influenced by hollow and deceptive philosophies. Again, it is tough work to preserve your republic. Many of us just want to kick up our feet and play Madden. Many of us just want to scroll through TikTok all day. But the fact of the matter is, all these things are distractions, or they can be distractions. And far too many of us are falling prey to the distractions and have no interest whatsoever in even learning what our republic is in the first place, let alone preserving it. And I think we owe it to our children to preserve the republic. We owe it to our children to do that. But at the same time, I say that, but I acknowledge this: whether or not the republic survives, I, as a Christian, am only in this world. I'm not of this world. And so this world can fail and everything with it, and it will fail. Everything here will perish. But even though it's important for me to preserve my republic, take care and be a good steward of this country that God has given us and the families that God has blessed me with, I need to be a good steward of that. But I can't proceed as if I can't fetishize it to the extent that I'm doing it at the expense of my bigger and larger calling, which is the kingdom of God. That's what I should be preparing my kids for. That's what I should be leading my wife with. That's what I should be living by myself. And so, sorry for the long-windedness.
No, that was
question, but,
well said. Yeah. Well said. I really appreciate that. Marlon, Corey, guys, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I got some closing thoughts, man. I really appreciate you here. Yeah, you know, we are a little long-winded sometimes, but we get that way when we got a lot to say. And you said a lot, you know what I'm saying? And I was in school and I received my lesson. If I take a test, hopefully I pass it, man. So I appreciate you taking time out to come on. And you know, that's it, man. I just really appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, Marlon, you had anything?
No, man. Everybody said it all, man. I don't need to add nothing more to that at
all. Cool. Chad, if you don't mind, man, if you don't mind telling the audience where they can find you, get access to your movie and everything.
Yeah. Uncle Tom 2 is available right now on uncletom.com. We talk about everything we talk about everything in this discussion and more. We talk about just the kind of vast array of Black history and American history at large, and even world history. And I think a lot of people will take away a lot from having watched the film. We're releasing the first 20 minutes of the film for free tomorrow to give those who are interested an idea of what the film is about. And again, you can find that on our website, uncletom.com. You can find me at Chad O. Jackson across all social media. Well, I say all, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So yeah, that's it.
One more thing before you go, man. So how was our audition?
Y'all did great.
We're just great. Just great.
So
you're just fine.
So we are working on. Well, I say working on. So we're going to be working on Uncle Tom Part 3, and I'm excited. I'm excited to get into that. I think that's going to be the most powerful movie, most powerful documentary ever. And I get to cast it. I get to
nice
artistic direction for it.
Nice.
I did a lot of the research already. I'm excited about it. Uncle Tom Part 1 was the oral history of the American Black conservative. The tagline for Uncle Tom 2 was An American Odyssey. The tagline for Uncle Tom Part 3 will be The Myth of Blackness. We'll be exploring this concept of Blackness and who historically has gotten the luxury of defining what Blackness is to the general public.
You're looking for trouble. Now,
we don't want to be. Where dude at, man? You heard from him again?
I know, right? Man, he was such a nice guy. What happened to him?
Do it while you can. Do it while you can. I did not. Commit suicide.
No, he definitely exploding the lid off of that one right there, man. Wow.
Especially with a lot of what's going on right now, with who runs Hollywood, who runs entertainment, who runs all these different things. Like, I'm very, very excited to get into that. And, you know, because a lot of people think that what's going on right now with regard to so-called Black culture is new, but it's not. You know, we found evidence of the same thing that's going on right now going on during the Harlem Renaissance. You know, we like to pay attention to the jazz and the poetry and all the things coming out of the Harlem Renaissance, but we don't ask the question, who financed a lot of this stuff? You know, a lot of the blues that was pushing lesbianism in the 1920s, that was pushing drunkenness in the 1920s, that was pushing drug use in the 1920s? Who was peddling and financing and funding all this stuff? Queerness and all these different things. We don't ask those questions, but Uncle Tom 3 will.
Uh-oh.
Follow the money. Follow the money. Wow. Well, again, thank you, Chad. I really appreciate it, man. I know you're pretty busy guy, man. I just really humbled and honored, blessed that you came on. I really do appreciate that, man. Marlon, Corey, if you guys have nothing else, I guess we are going to close it off, man. Guys, if you can, go check out my channel. It is The Real Unwoke. The Real Unwoke. Hey, Corey, I tried to get the link to drop it in here, but I just cannot.
The Real Unwoke. The Real Unwoke.
Yeah, it's.
I got you.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Marlon do that stuff fast. I think he a clone.
Yes, he just did. Like, zoom.
Might be a clone.
Sweet. Yeah, guys, to check out my channel, go subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell, all that jazz. Appreciate it, guys. If we have nothing more, you guys have a great night.
All right, man. Y'all good. Have a good one.
There it is. Links up.
Yes, sir.